episode 3 of the Racing Line podcast for 2022. Another off-season special. A few different topics to talk about tonight. Men, how are we going? What's been happening?
Not bad,
much, mate.
Just living life.
Living life.
That's it.
Yeah.
Enjoyed some racing over the weekend, which was good to finally
Hell yeah,
do.
Hell yeah, we did.
So again, off-season. It's getting a bit long in the tooth now. We're a week away from some official livery launches, which is a bit more than a week away from a few Formula One livery launches. But until then, let's just keep filling the time with some of our, off-season topics. And we've got a few tonight that we've collated together that relate to V8 Supercars in particular. So let's just jump straight into that, Joey. First point that I've got here is the point you've made about Walkinshaw and their search for another manufacturer for Gen 3.
Yeah.
How would you like to begin?
I'll just say what I've learnt first. So this week on the Rusty's Garage, Greg Rust's podcast, they interviewed Ryan Walkinshaw, and they were sort of discussing like sort of the transition to Gen 3 and his search for a manufacturer in this time. And
it has been going on for almost 5 years now, really, eh? That search.
Since the Walkinshaw and Andretti United collaboration. And he did disclose that even though he can't disclose what manufacturers they are, he's talking to 6 of them, and they will be making a decision soon on which manufacturer they will be bringing. So they would be liking to bring a new manufacturer next year.
For 2023?
With the beginning of Gen 3. And if not, I'd say the year after that. But yeah, they want to bring one in still for the beginning of Gen 3, which I thought was really interesting. And then I thought, well, what we've been discussing, if they can just drop engines in and out of these cars, I was thinking, well, maybe it'll be just the silhouette first and then engine sort of development to come after that. But,
could you imagine it being a Ford or a Holden engine initially, like that lines up with one of those brother manufacturers?
That's what I'm saying.
Very interesting.
So you're saying there's 6 on the table, and a decision will be made soon whether or not they'll be beginning with, like they'll be signing up with a new manufacturer for next year, or they'll be making a decision to wait a year after.
Are there any ideas on who the manufacturers are?
Well, we know that he was talking to BMW extensively just before sort of this whole COVID thing started.
Yeah, and Andretti's got a affiliation.
And Andretti, yeah, and Andretti has an affiliation with them, or he used to. Man, if I was to spitball, I'd say it's either going to be a Honda, BMW. I'm just trying to think of teams that United and Andretti have partnerships with. I mean, other than that, like they're the 2 big ones, I'd say Honda or BMW, maybe Volkswagen, because what Walkinshaw work do.
Oh yeah, they do.
What
car would have been the Passat?
Yeah, they'd probably do a Passat or something.
Arterion or whatever it's called. That's similar size, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's definitely interesting.
It's good for the sport. It's really healthy for the sport.
Yeah, it'd be really good for the sport.
I don't understand why someone like Toyota's not in it with the amount of money they're putting into motorsport.
It could even be Toyota, but I would doubt it. I mean, the thing is now with these new rules, and we've discussed this numerous times, with the new silhouette options, you can bring in so many more shapes. Like I don't know how much leeway there is, but I don't like. Hypothetically, could you bring in something as like low as a McLaren, or is that even lower than the Corvette and the Mustang?
I don't think McLaren would see supercars as a viable kind of racing strategy for them. It's still,
I don't think they would, but it'd be interesting.
I don't think McLaren would be coming in. They're like a GT kind of.
Realistically, that you can even be looking to run like a BRZ or kind of shape as well. So
The thing that's going to actually be interesting is if, like, it's the fact that they've already come out and said this so soon after, well, not so soon really, but it's been on the tables for a while, but so soon after the official launch of Gen 3, which was, only a couple of months ago at Bathurst, bodes really well for other manufacturers coming into the sport too. And I think maybe the fact that it's, focusing on being affordable, etc., makes it a little bit more of a viable option for them. The only thing that I do want to see now is once, or now that the engines have been homologated, does that give enough time to Supercars, if they wanted to bring another engine in to homologate again, enough time this year to do that, which, it should be the case. But then does it give them enough time to test if they were to push for, a 2023 release with the start of Gen 3? So it's an interesting topic, that's for sure. And it's a good thing to see in Supercars. And hopefully what it does is spark the interest of a few more manufacturers too. And maybe that might be the case once we know who the manufacturer is, and if there's any kind of rival manufacturers that have raced against them before that want to kind of make the jump as well. So yeah, it's very interesting. I like that.
Like you could just quickly as well, you could say that, as you said, like now that we've seen the cars, that has also probably given them something to go take to whoever they were talking to and say, all right, now we're not talking about like theories anymore. Like this is like what they're going to look like. Like this is the vision that we're aiming for. You know what I mean? So in that respect as well, you can see that like it's also like a gift to them, saying, all right, here's what we've got now. Do you want to? Are you out?
Yeah, I agree.
I think just quickly also with Supercars having multiple manufacturers, now that the whole Ford versus Holden thing's kind of dying out, I think that's only going to spark more interest and bring more people to the sport. Don't you think?
I think so.
100%.
I was actually thinking this week as well, like it's probably a controversial topic, but with Supercars kind of, it is going to lose its Ford versus Holden DNA. Would it have been wise for them to pull the plug on the V8 DNA as well and maybe push for a V6 turbo option, like in some other touring car categories, just to make it even more kind of appealing to a lot of those other manufacturers out there who have smaller engines?
If you remember when Red Bull ran their V6 engine, remember in that Sandman concept car?
Yeah.
The consensus was widely against it, and that's why the Holden back then did a full 180 on that idea, went back to the V8 engine. I think one thing as well that now is that, dude, you can put whatever
engine you want in it.
Like you can put whatever, like on whatever shell. Like what's it? TRD's been doing that in NASCAR for years. So like it's probably going to be the same thing. What you were saying as well about homologating another engine, if not now that there's two sort of sizes homologated, the 5.7 and the 6 liter, I think it is. As long as they probably brought in an engine on either of those two sizes, you'd probably imagine that it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to try and get it lined up with one of them. But I just thought it was an interesting sort of news article to sort of read about, especially now, because they definitely have not got much time. If you think like we got like a calendar year, that's about it. Yeah.
Just to close on this topic, and we'll move on to something else, but the fact that there already has been interest from other manufacturers should probably mean that, if, as Supercars was saying before, if they were considering coming up with the spec engine that they were going to produce and then they would be able to sell, it's probably a good idea that they get onto that sooner rather than later. Just so that if, there's a manufacturer that comes in that, wants to, put their car in the shop window, so to speak, they've got an engine that's suitable, even if they're not kind of producing those kind of capacity engines. So I think that might be something to consider as well. And we've already seen how, with other touring car categories, a spec engine can be put into any chassis and run fairly effectively. Our second point, which is again pretty interesting, and it might be something worth having a short discussion about is the struggles that Peter Adderton is having to get to REC, so 2 contracts to start his team in 2023. The Supercars have to, maybe bite the bullet and just allow a larger field, or why maybe you can answer this, Joe. Why is it so difficult, or why don't they want to increase the size of the grid? Is it just track capacity?
I'm not sure if it's track capacity. I mean, for years they haven't even been presented with the problem of running their 26 car grid. I mean, we're at 25 now, and I think it's sort of always been within the 22s to the 24s for the many years before that. So they've always had racing entitlements up their sleeve, and now with one left, I mean, the long and short of it is you've got someone with a lot of money wanting to invest in your sport and bring a new, not a new sponsor, he's been there for a while, but a new team into the sport. I think they will have to bite the bullet, but I think the one thing that Peter Adderton has done, probably to his detriment, is he airs dirty laundry very quickly, and he's not one to not sort of let his opinions known, which is fine. But I feel like he could that attitude could definitely rub the establishment up the wrong way.
I think I might have heard a couple of years ago as well. I think maybe when Tickford were asking if they could bring another team in, that it might have something to do with the splitting of prize money, and the current teams that are in Supercars don't want to add more entries to the grid, because it would mean that each entry would essentially have, less of a slice to the prize money.
Pool.
Yeah, something like that. So that might be another consideration. But again, I don't think that's.
We've got to.
That not stunt the growth?
Yeah, that's the consideration.
Well, it will stunt the growth, but I mean, a 26 car grid in itself is the biggest we've had, and this is going to now take it to 27, and we're at 25 now. I mean, I would if I was Supercars, you probably want to bite the bullet. Having said that, we've got a year now for teams to sort of work out what their ambitions are after this year. Number one, having said that, how it is structured now with all these smaller 2-car teams, I can't see many wrecks dropping, except maybe from Tickford.
Tickford won't drop, I don't think. That's the problem.
I don't think they will. Or maybe.
And even I've heard that Blanchard Racing want to expand to a 2-car team as well.
Yeah, that's right. So it's definitely an interesting proposition, that's for sure. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
What about the news of
to look at for next year?
What about the big news from the last fortnight, which is definitely a disappointment for us, Sydney race fans. Team Sydney, which was supposed to be, the next big infrastructure motorsport project in New South Wales, has closed its doors after 2 years. So the team hasn't really fulfilled any of its expectations, from what they were saying when they kind of started the project. I don't think it helped that they kind of came into existence in a COVID situation, so that wouldn't have been beneficial for them as well. But even for a team like Techno, who have done pretty well over their existence, they've probably dwindled a little bit since they lost Will Davison. But they're a team that's won 2 Bathurst 1000s, and they're a team that, with Davison and Van Gisbergen had been, on the pointier end of the grid. The underperformance was a little bit startling, and they've kind of just been sold now to Peter Shiberis and Premier Racing, and they're moving up to Queensland before the season starts. So what do you make of that?
Well, I wasn't surprised that they were getting sold, that's for sure, when the news broke. I mean, Techno has been a relatively well-run organization for a few times, but when it was announced that Techno was going to be the new Team Sydney, I feel like the writing was on the wall that they were on the decline already. I don't know if you thought that as well.
I think
And
it would have been interesting to know what the trajectory was without all the COVID issues.
I mean, there was a few things that rubbed me up the wrong way before that Team Sydney sort of announcement was made. I think the first one was when I think it was at Bathurst, or it was at one of the endurance races where LeBrock and Webb had a falling out, and it was well publicized. And Webb said, "Well, I own this car, so I'm going to do most of the laps, and you're going to do the co-driver amount of laps." So I think that like that year with LeBrock was definitely the start of their downfall, and they didn't fill that seat with what I would call like a hungry driver that was going to sort of push the envelope. And they've sort of set, I mean, you say the word, they've settled for sort of mediocrity, and I suppose maybe that's to do with funding, with this whole COVID thing as well. But they've just never looked like
they even lost, like, that James Courtney was supposed to go there and lend his expertise, and they lost him even before the season started. So even something like that, like,
there was always
it hasn't gone about very. I'm just saying, thinking it just hasn't gone about very well for them.
Yeah,
to be honest, and that's pretty disappointing. And hopefully,
go for it.
I'm just saying, hopefully, with Peter Schuberus and what he's done, in top fuel racing over the last couple of years, has been a level of professionalism, and definitely a level of winning that is taken in that particular avenue. So I mean, hopefully he's able to do something with this team, because
there's a team that's fallen off the.
Yeah, and what is that?
They're moving to Brisbane, or is it the Gold Coast, one or the other? But their cars are now, it's been confirmed, they're going to be prepped by 888 Racing. So I mean, number one, it's a sign of intent. Doesn't sort of assure anything, because Team 18 sort of has that, gets their cars from 888 as well. 888 as well. But at least it's a sign of intent and wanting to put your best foot forward. Having said that, their problem still is that their driver lineup, I just don't think, is strong enough to make a dent in sort of the competition. When you look at the likes of, so you've got, without even thinking about it, 888 cars, Dick Johnson cars, Tickford cars, Walkinshaw cars, Erebus cars, all have better lineups than them, and that's already about 12 cars. Then you've got drivers in the Brad Jones stable, you've got Team 18. So, and I would say all those teams have better lineups than them. So even though their cars are being prepped by 888, I still feel like, at least for this year, that driver lineup is going to be limited in what they can sort of push for. And then they've lost Fabian Coulthard.
Yeah.
So
it'll be an interesting scenario just to see how the team gets organised and gets settled back before the season. They've kind of done this in 6 weeks, so we'll see what that looks like. The fact that we've lost Newcastle till a later time in the year is probably a good thing for them. But just transitioning into the schedule. So Supercars has finally brought out the kind of race formats for the different kind of events that are occurring. We're starting with Sydney, kind of like the end of last year. You've got 2 300-kilometre races to start the season, which is pretty big. So obviously, without any sprint races or anything like that, we jump straight into some pretty long races, which is going to be a challenge for the team and all that kind of caper. Then we move to Tasmania for a triple sprint round, and then going to the Grand Prix for 4 very short 100-kilometre races. Yeah, they're very short. But kind of
like a sprint race.
Yeah, they're definitely super sprints. I think they might be they're normally like 12 laps or something like that, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so it'll be fun to see live though, Harry. So that's a good thing. Then we have Perth, just sprint rounds. Winton, more sprint rounds. Darwin, 3 sprint rounds again. Townsville is going to be 2 250-kilometre races, which is great to see. And then we have the Bend, which is one thing that keeps disappointing me. They've got a track like the Bend that is so large. Why can't they turn that into an endurance round? But anyway, we've got 3 races at the Bend.
Are they doing it as sprint rounds?
They're all sprint rounds at
They
the
was
Bend.
they were supposed to make that an endurance
Yeah,
round when they got rid of the Sandown 500.
They've got 3. They've got 3 races. So the Bendy's got 3 races, Sandown 3 races, Pukekohe 3 races. Then we've got the Bathurst 1000, 2 250-kilometer Gold Coast races, and then 2 250-kilometer Newcastle races as well. So we've got a few larger format races, but predominantly sprints, and it's probably what we expected to see, really.
Is the Gold Coast track the old IndyCar track?
Yep,
It's
a little
might
bit
have-
shorter.
Might have
They've
to go up
shortened
for
it
that.
That'll
Have
be
you
a
ever
fantastic
watched
track.
that on TV?
I went up years ago for the IndyCar.
Yeah, it's a top event. Probably one of my favorite races to watch for Supercars. That and probably Townsville, but that's an epic race to see. To be honest with you, might be a good
trip.
watch live. Yeah, just to get away from it all at the end of the year.
Correct.
All right, moving on again. We saw the release of the Grove cars. So Grove Racing is 2 Penrite cars this year, which is nice to see. Not a whole lot to talk about in Supercar livery land just yet, but that's a good thing. But as we were talking about a little bit before, well, we haven't spoken about it, but Joe, Supercars and their intention to go international. What do you make of that?
Yeah, there's not much news on that really. I mean, but I do think it's I think it's awesome. I just hope they choose the right event and track to go to. I mean, the new CEO that was his sort of statement saying that there's intention to grow the sport internationally, and
let me rephrase it then. Where should Supercars go? What might be a viable and positive commercial situation, and where should they be going to try to sell themselves? Yeah,
I think the biggest, not the biggest, the best idea would be going to Asia. Either, I mean, this would be a long shot, but I'd love to see them at like an F1 event like Singapore, like on a track like that. That would be I think a really cool spectacle. But if not, maybe try and get to a track like Suzuka or something. I'm just trying to think of tracks that sort of you can cut the layout a little bit. So I think like a full F1 track might be a bit too long or not enough. Having said that, it's not. Yes, like Suzuka, but I'd like, or even Sepang, because Sepang doesn't have a real international event there anymore. They don't race
at Sepang anymore.
Yeah, so.
I think you're right. I think if they are going to go international, it's probably a good thing that they do try to piggyback off of an already existing event.
I think if they went to like one of that Singapore night race, that would be an awesome sort of display from them. But like, it's already such a cool looking event because it's under the lights. I think that would be awesome.
Probably good as well because. Oh, sorry, mate. Keep going.
I was just going to say, what happened to the Bahrain experiment? Was it Bahrain they went to years ago?
Yeah, they went to
Bahrain, and then they went to Coda as well. But
they were very expensive trips.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm saying like Asia, because it's not as expensive in terms of distance, and also it's sort of catering to the people who we have a lot of tourism from as well.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So like that's sort of why, and piggybacking off an F1 event, getting those eyeballs can only do you well.
The good thing about Singapore as well is it's a track that they don't have any F2 races at, because it's obviously in Asia, and they don't have as big like supporter categories. So that might also allow them to kind of, I don't want to say flex their muscle, but have slightly longer races and try to make it a little bit more of an event for them too. So that I like that idea. I didn't think about that, but Singapore actually would be an awesome,
I'd say
marketing strategy for them.
Singapore or Yas Marina, that'd be for my 2 tracks I'd choose. Yeah. I just think that was a welcome sort of pleasant surprise in terms of like at least we've got a bit of intent to sort of spread the sport like we were talking about last week.
What about you, H? Where would you like to see him race?
I think I like the idea of Singapore. When he said piggyback off a Formula One event, I thought Singapore straight away.
Yeah.
It's just what a spectacle that would be, seeing those things on the streets. I just don't know. The track is quite narrow, and those cars are quite big and heavy. So I don't know.
They're getting smaller. They are getting smaller next year, though. So that's good.
Yeah, true. So it may work. And like you said, there's no Formula 2 or anything. So
it's a good consideration.
And when we're talking about finances, like it's probably the closest track other than Albert Park, really.
Yeah, definitely.
I can't think of anything else that would be closer.
I like that idea. That's a good one. All right, moving on. That's a good topic. So obviously it's not a long pod, but we've got a few other things that we can probably talk about, which is good. So obviously we had a bit of racing that returned this weekend. We just had the 24 hours of Daytona that took place finished this morning. We had an Australian that won in the GT D category. So that's the Pro GT3 category. So Matt Campbell won another race, put another feather in his bow. Pretty entertaining race, particularly for the GT cars. But if you've got YouTube open, or a little bit later on, you might want to give it a watch. But I was also watching some Formula E this weekend, just to give me something to watch, and that was a double header round, and there was some pretty entertaining racing there. But what I did notice and was thinking about, and I want to get your guys' opinion on it, was this. There's a lot of ex-Formula One races in it. There's a lot of young ex-Formula One races right now in Formula E, which is good to see, because obviously we're seeing, drivers that kind of are stunting their growth in F1 or F2, whatever it might be, have another avenue. But in recent years, we've seen a lot of drivers moving from Formula 2 into IndyCar. We've seen a lot of drivers move into Formula E as well. But with the extended lifespan essentially of the Formula One driver in recent years, it's probably pretty important that we do have the emergence of, some of these other single-seater categories, just so that we don't lose some of the talent that was definitely on the Formula 2 grid. What do you guys think about that?
Well, when I watched that on the weekend, you got De Vries, you've got Stoffel, you've got Verline. I've got the list here. There's some big names in that. You got obviously Giovinazzi, Tictum. So all these guys that have recently been racing in Europe. It's surprising that De Vries hasn't had a chance in Formula One.
Yeah,
not gonna lie. Stoffel had his go at McLaren, and we all know what Tictum's done.
Yeah,
but I think it's good.
The interesting thing though is that you've got racers like Nick De Vries, for example, who probably did warrant. I don't know if he warranted one, because it took him quite a while in Formula 2 to finally win the championship. But does moving to Formula E, even though they say, I want to get back into Formula 1, realistically, I doubt if they're ever going to get there. And that's probably the only downside, because I mean, while they're good races, it's, you've always got Formula 2 drivers that are current, that are winning, that are going to take the prize. So I don't know. I think that as a platform to move back into Formula 1, I think it's kind of a bit of a fart, but it is creating some really good racing. And as much as I want to not watch it, I find myself coming back in an odd way.
The one thing I don't like about it is the gimmicky stuff. The fan boosts and the, what is it, where they drive, they miss the apex and get the boost and all that kind of.
I don't mind that, because everybody gets I can't remember what it's called. It's essentially like a 3-minute push to pass. I don't mind that. I think the fan boost is a little bit too gimmicky though, because obviously if there's an unfair advantage for just a few drivers, wouldn't say that I'm a fan of that. But everything else, I feel like it works pretty well. And what's actually the most exciting thing for me is that they are, even though they're kind of keeping the same chassis for the cars, they are increasing the speeds of the car every year, and they're becoming a little bit more reliable. I mean, and a little bit more able to harvest energy and all those kind of things. So it is becoming a little bit more engaging and a little bit less gimmicky in that regard. But I guess it's just something else for us to put our eyes on when there's no Formula One on. So
think,
you were going to say
um,
something? Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say one thing I do enjoy about Formula E. I mean, what you said about drivers getting back out of Formula E to Formula One, I don't think is a reality, because you sort of see a lot of the best drivers in it are guys who had a chance in Formula One and couldn't make it work. Like you've got guys like Buemi and Degrassi who have been sort of the better guys in it for a long time. But I do like seeing drivers from different disciplines coming into it and sort of racing together. So like even I think Mortara won the second race
Yeah.
this week, and like so he's sort of come out of DTM, and then you've got guys like
Nick Cassidy
like
come out of Super
Cassidy
GT.
coming out of Super. Yeah, so it's sort of like a bit of a amalgamation of talent from sort of different disciplines, and it's cool to see them all racing together in relatively even sort of hardware, which is another cool thing about it. I mean, it was actually interesting because Virgin have pulled out of it, and I think they've just gone to that spot. The team is now just the sponsor of the Virgin team from last year. What is it? And
Vision Racing.
Vision Racing, yeah. But I mean, there's nothing on, so to watch something is awesome, no matter what. And I still think that the tracks look terrible though. There's just not enough dressing in terms of like
track,
character.
Yeah, the track that they had this year, this weekend in Jeddah, was one of the better Formula E tracks that I've seen, because a lot of the time you've got tracks that struggle, like they're always very narrow. They struggle with having any braking zones or areas of genuine passing maneuvers. But when I watched this race, I felt like the track was a little bit more traditional. It was a little bit more boxy, but what it did allow for was a lot more genuine passing moves. And that was probably one of the first times in a long time that I watched a Formula E race, and I kind of felt like the track's wide enough for some good overtaking. And genuinely, it was quite enjoyable to watch. The races were engaging. There was good, back and forth in regards to, people moving up and down the order. So when I did watch it, I kind of felt like this was, this is Formula E progressing somewhat. So I really did enjoy the racing this week, and I have to say that more so than I thought. So hopefully that's a trend that continues, because what none of us like seeing, and it was kind of happening too often over definitely the early years of Formula E, was really narrow tracks, which made really stupid and clumsy looking accidents, which kind of didn't do the category any benefit. But yeah, I thumbs up from Formula E this week. Hey, she had a question about it.
Sorry, one thing that I did enjoy as well is that the rocket team Venturi, they've made their livery like the Dale Coyne rocket car in IndyCar, like they're identical. So I thought that was pretty cool, and I like the uniformity from that. That's for sure. But yeah, go H.
Just a couple of things. I enjoy the racing, but it drives me nuts that they sound like Dyson vacuums. Like you know when you watch any other category, you can the noise of the cars.
Yeah,
they don't sound. That's what I can't get past at this point. The racing is good though, but do you think long term, with all the big teams pulling out, or a number of big teams pulling out at the end of last year, do you think it's a viable category moving forward?
I think it's viable as long as you've got some like if you can keep the likes of Mahindra in there, for example. Like we don't know anything about Mahindra in Australia, but that's a massive vehicle company in India, and then you've got the likes of Jaguar in there as well. I mean,
Mercedes.
I think Mercedes is pulling out, aren't they?
Are
I
they?
think Mercedes is going to pull out. Yeah,
They're done at the end of the year.
Well, I think for Formula E to actually be like a sustainable category, it needs to probably adopt something a little bit like a IndyCar method. So I think they should have it, like they've obviously got a chassis that's bespoke to, like it's not bespoke, sorry, it's all teams have the same chassis. What I reckon they should be doing is probably trying to find two powertrain manufacturers potentially, even if it's one, it doesn't really matter. But if they had, for example, two powertrain manufacturers that were able to compete with each other to develop the technology, and keep developing it further, they probably need something like that. But apart from that, if teams are able to buy a chassis and able to buy a power plant, not a power plant, but a power train and power system, and there was kind of maybe one or two options for them, and they were just customers in that regard, I think the category would be successful. I don't think it's dependent so much on, like, it was good to see the works teams in there, Mercedes, BMW, etc. I probably think that they realize that they don't get enough relevance from it, if that makes sense, or whatever it might be. But I think for them to be successful, they just need to keep developing the chassis, and then having maybe one or two, powertrain developers that can kind of keep developing that technology as well. And I think, if it takes a strategy like IndyCar, where you buy everything, it makes it cheaper, and it just might. And I don't think it's dependent on seeing the silver arrows and stuff like that.
The other thing
that's my thought.
The other thing that will also be good when these OEMs leave is that the early adopters of it. So all the teams that were early in, so like teams like Neo, teams like Andretti, teams like Venturi, who really haven't had much success because you've had like Porsche, Mercedes.
Even a team like DS Techeetah went from being the best team to kind of,
and even like Mahindra were a good team for a long time. So like the removal of all these teams who have come in late, sort of on the hype train, so that these early adopters, sort of the pioneers of the sport, who really started it, will have a better chance of sort of being on the podium and make their relevance in the sport a little bit stronger as well. So I think that will be cool. Like that will be sort of a good silver lining for the sport as well, in terms of its longevity.
I know that like Formula E wants to kind of be formula racing and kind of having development being part of its DNA, like Formula One is. But I don't know. I tend to think that if they just kind of focus on trying to develop a good product, like in relation to the show, because that's essentially what it is. It's a bit of a gimmick in and of itself, the way that the racing occurs and stuff like that. So if they focus on the show and they kind of adopt a strategy that makes it affordable for these kind of bespoke, quirky teams to come in that you never really hear from, then I think that kind of works as well for them in the long term. And then they're not dependent on having 6 manufacturers and then 5 of them pulling out all at the same time. So I don't know, I think that might be a strategy for them. But with all that being said, great racing this year, and I hope it continues. And if it does continue, then we might be able to talk about it, a little bit more. The last thing that I wanted to talk about tonight, and we probably don't have to delve into it for too long, but I just wanted to talk about the amount of teams that we're going to be seeing in prototype racing next year, which has to be, sorry, before we go on, H, do you have another question that I just cut you off on?
No. Probably, I can't remember. Yeah, it's all good.
All right.
Move on.
So yeah, let's get this done and get this out of there. So WEC next year and prototype racing in America, we're going to see a whole bunch of teams racing at the top level of prototypes. So we've got Porsche coming in, we've got Audi coming in, Cadillac staying in, Acura are staying in, BMW are joining as well, and that's all in America. And then we've got Toyota, Peugeot, Ferrari, Glickenhaus, and Vanwell all in Europe. So at next year's 24-hour of Le Mans.
Sorry, and Alpine.
And Alpine. At next year's 24 hours of Le Mans, there could be 10 different 10 different manufacturers, teams lining up on the grid, which would be the first time in, almost 20 years, or, even longer than that. That's awesome, I think, to see. And the reason why I think it's so cool is we're talking about these good drivers that, going through the formula categories and really not having a chance to ever make it to Formula One. But now we've finally got another category with so much factory support for some of these young, talented drivers to be joining. I think in relation to motorsport as a whole, this is kind of a really healthy position for the sport to be in, and particularly for the fans of so many different teams to finally have, another series other than Formula One, where there's so much, high-powered cars with so many different manufacturers going at it. So I was very excited about that on the weekend. I just wanted to share that as well.
I think the excitement has been building because the thought of it has been in the air for so long. Far out since probably like 2015, they've been talking about this.
Mm.
And to sort of finally sort of get onto that doorstep where everything's sort of coming together is really exciting. I mean, watching the race this weekend got me excited just because it's been a while since there's been a good endurance race like that. But what you're saying as well is very true. One thing I was enjoying on the weekend was, like I said, with the Formula E as well, you get to see so many drivers from different disciplines come in. So like we saw Scott Dixon, like for nearly half the IndyCar grid was in different teams throughout that whole grid. And then you get to see like Kevin Magnussen was there, Grosjean was there. Then you have like Jimmy Johnson from NASCAR was there. You know, like we've seen Van Gisbergen and Whincup go across there. So like that whole aspect of endurance racing, I think, really is what can bring fans from different disciplines in, which is awesome. And then also with this whole, what's the word for it? Yeah, convergence. We've got the convergence of GT racing happening at the exact same time, with the removal of GTE and making everything GT3. So I mean, for us, it's going to be hopefully the best year of endurance motorsport yet. But what you're saying is true. With all these new factory doors opening, we'll see talent not be sort of not wasted, but there'll be a top tier sort of display for them to be put into, rather than sort of losing them in the like LMP2 or the GT ranks.
More obscure categories that you wouldn't be aware of unless you were kind of really into it, which I think is really cool to see. H, what was your
wild?
Yeah, it's going to be mad. H, what was your query?
I just wanted to discuss the whole Honda staying in Formula One until 2025.
Yes,
I can't believe we forgot about that. We should have opened with that. Can you edit this podcast and start with that?
Yeah, I reckon we should. The absolute shithousery from Red Bull making the engine regulations freeze until 2025, because they were saying for them to take over the power units, they'd need the engine freeze, and then all of a sudden Honda staying in the sport. What do you guys think?
Does that screw up the whole Red Bull powertrains, like the amount of money they've invested in that? They have hired a lot of people to go into that area of Red Bull. I
don't think they did.
Aren't going to be needed.
I think that what they're going to do is work in tandem and then take over the production after 2025. And those new people that they've hired, don't quote me on this, could potentially be working on something for the new engine rules.
Do you reckon now that Honda's staying if they have, let's say Honda has more success for the next 3 years, do you actually think they're going to be leaving?
Who knows with Honda?
With the cost cap now?
Who knows? Apparently the initial issue was Honda didn't like the technology. Like they felt they couldn't utilize the technology in the hybrid engine for the electrification phase, but apparently they've found a use for the batteries, and that's why they're staying. But I don't know. I think that's just spin.
I thought it was so bizarre. You know, I actually commend them for making this decision, because I felt like the rhetoric that we were getting to, particularly at the end of last season when Red Bull were fighting for the championship, was almost like they were disappointed that they made the decision to leave. That was obvious. Like, it's what it seemed like. So the fact that they kind of bit the bullet and were humble enough to say, I think we might have left too early, let's stay in, like we've got a good thing going, is a good thing for them. And it's also a good thing for Formula One. So even though it's a bit of a cluster, and you know we can call it shit house or whatever it might be, I think for the sport, for their company, it's actually a good thing. And what it allows them to do is take that one-off championship that they kind of redeemed themselves since they were reintroduced to Formula One, and maybe they realize this as well, is that they're able to maybe make a dynasty of it and actually say, we came back into Formula One and we were able to make quite a large success from that particular pursuit. regardless of how bad it was at the beginning. So I actually respect them and commend them for not being proud and actually saying, no, we should stay in this for at least another couple of years. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them in Formula One after 2025. Even if Red Bull was to leave, I think they've definitely put themselves in the shop window for another team to want to get involved, or maybe even for them to say, let's get back into Formula One ourselves, if with all the cost cap and stuff like that. So I think that's pretty cool. Good for Formula One.
It's got to be the most Honda thing ever, though. Like when that news came out, I found it so humorous. I was like, of course they're staying. That's just a Honda thing to do. But if you think about it, like if you break it down over the however many years it's been with the this new turbo hybrid, well, not new, this turbo hybrid era, they are the second most successful team now in terms of not even in terms of championships, in terms of race wins. And if you
Are they really?
They would have to be
More than Ferrari?
how many?
And Renault maybe. Like considering Red Bull had them for.
How many wins
did
Renault get?
Renault would have only won about
9?
8 wins. Yeah, 8 or 9. I think not even that. I think Vettel might have won 1 and Ricciardo won all the other ones.
Okay. Oh, Verstappen won some as well.
Max was in some.
Oh, true.
Hmm.
It's true. It's interesting.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing I was thinking about in this regard as well, if Mercedes won the championship, would Red Bull have stayed?
No.
Oh, sorry, would Honda have stayed, or would they have just kind of said, "Oh no, go Red Bull powertrains"?
I don't think so. I think that whole winning the championship definitely had something to play.
That makes it a very huge, it makes it a huge moment in history for them. The fact that they were able to win the championship, if that's part of the reason why they stayed, then.
Suppose it validates what they've been doing.
They've been trying to replicate this since what? The Williams days? The 90s?
Since the McLaren days.
McLaren, yeah.
Williams were never Honda. Williams or Renault, mate.
Williams or Honda, you knob.
Williams were Renault.
They were also Honda before Renault.
That was before Renault, man. So we're talking about like when they were last successful.
Yeah, fair. Maybe it probably was Honda, McLaren. Yeah, fair enough. All right, I'll give you that.
You don't have to give it to me. It's fact, mate.
It's
fact.
It is big news though. Like
massive news, but
Formula One.
And I think it's good too, because who knows how reliable that power unit would be with Red Bull in charge. So we know it's a pretty reliable unit at the moment. So you're going to have your Ferrari, your Red Bull, or your Honda, your Renault, and your Mercedes, and all 4 are quite strong at this point.
I think the good thing for Red Bull is also the fact that even though I don't doubt their expertise, they didn't really need to, they were going to do it to stay in the sport and to have their own kind of say in their power manufacturer. But I think for them, if they're able to save money and not have to build their own engine, they haven't done it, for the last 15 years when they've been in the sport. If they're able to do that and kind of still be competitive, it's a win for them, and they can invest more time into the development of the car, etc. So I think it's a win-win for everyone. The interesting thing will be if Red Bull and Honda continue to have success and Honda wants to become a works team again. Maybe, I don't know, that's the only interesting thing, where Red Bull would sit in that particular relationship once that was to occur. So again, thinking super far ahead, but
Honda have never had success as a works team.
No, they haven't. But let's think about it. If they're coming into the sport potentially in 2025 and they've got a validated and competitive engine, as opposed to other years when they're definitely starting from behind the 8 ball, they've kind of, the new thing about Formula One is now that any team joining only has to reach a ceiling. It's not like an unattainable goal to that you're always climbing. Like there's a ceiling that everybody's going to be capped at, and then that once they're able to get to that ceiling, hopefully they're competitive. So it's a different dynamic to Formula One now.
It's not, because if you think about it, if you've got a cost cap, if you're the best team in 1 year, you can use your next year's cap to get further ahead than teams who aren't at your level. So it's not as easy as you might say it is, like in terms of that, you know what I mean?
I just don't think the disparity would be Mercedes 10 seconds up the road and everyone
I hope
else.
I hope not. I don't think it will be, but
Mm.
I think like it's probably a discussion for another night, but I think the thing about Formula One is there's obviously going to be teams that are pushing for the championships. But if you've got a manufacturer that wants to come in and let's say they weren't winning championships, but they were at least getting on podiums and potentially challenging for race wins, even that level of success keeps them chomping at the bit to want to stay in. Whereas what we've seen in recent years is that they've been so far away from even the podium. It's that, it's a genuine question for them to ask, what are we actually doing here? So I think the cost cap, maybe it doesn't give them the chance to go from coming into the sport to winning races, but hopefully it does give them the chance relatively quickly to be competitive enough to just kind of to be amongst it. And I think that's where hopefully for the new formula and the new regulations and things like that allow new teams to kind of situate themselves. Not even thrive, but just get amongst it, feel competitive, feel like, if everything goes your way, you might have a chance for some decent points or potentially a podium. And if that's there and there's that level of motivation to kind of motivate you for, sorry to use the word twice, then I think that keeps people engaged as opposed to coming and just racing for, a top thing of, 7th if everything goes well and no one else has a DNF in front of where you're supposed to sit. So I don't know. I think it's good. It's really good for Honda. It's really good for Formula One.
Did you hear? I can't remember who it was. Someone in the news was saying that they expect at least three teams to interpret the new sort of what is it?
James Allison was saying that.
Was it James Allison? Like disastrously bad.
Yeah.
What do you think of that when you read it?
I don't. Is he saying it because it's
Scares me.
historically speaking, or because maybe they were even?
I would say
felt like it was ambiguous what they were reading.
I would say because they've realized how much of even though it sounds simple, it's actually going to be a big job to be competitive, like adapting something that they haven't ever, like this is a way of designing a car that has like the whole philosophy has never been sort of attempted before by Formula One teams. It's sort of a total flip of how they would, what's the word?
How they've done it recently. But
not even recently, forever.
Do you know what encourages me? The fact that they've had an extra year to get on top of this, to sim it, to kind of develop it, etc. Like, I don't know, the time that they've had to work on this, I'm sure that all the teams are coming up with their best possible interpretation of the formula. And I think that they've had more than enough time to kind of model and digitally verify the cars that they're producing. Now, I guess it's impossible to do the most accurate verifications without being able to test it physically as well. But with where technology is getting to now and the amount of time that they've had to work on the cars and the amount of, the fact that we've seen this year a number of teams that have really given no resourcing to the current car, I don't know, I'm optimistic that more teams get it right than others. And even teams that don't get it 100% right aren't, left by the wayside.
Yeah, and I'm hoping the fact that their engine regs have barely changed, that they're similar to what they've been running, that you're not going to have cars that are quick but keep breaking down. And that's what I'm excited about. Like we'll get, if the car's good, they'll be at the at the front end, the pointy end of the grid. So
at least be competitive, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember the first race of the turbo hybrid era?
Melbourne Park.
No.
Melbourne, when
Actually
McLaren's broke down within a lap. One of the McLaren's broke down on the warm-up lap. Sauber was coming third. Like it was.
Is that the one where DR was on the
were-
podium, then they took it away from him?
Yeah, but even still, he was on the podium and he was like forever behind. Like it was just one of the most crappy races you could watch. Let's just hope that doesn't. And I don't think it will happen. I think that there's been enough time for these super smart people to come up with a solution that, even if it's not going to work 100%, should at least get them, within the ballpark. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, exciting.
All right, boys, I think we'll leave it there tonight. Thanks for jumping on. That's another 45 minutes. That's not too bad. All right. So thanks everyone for listening again. Hopefully, well, not we'll see if we've got something next week for you. But within the next fortnight now, we've obviously got liveries coming out. So maybe we might do a bit of a discussion about those liveries, and let's try to make the video a bit more dynamic as well, with maybe some of the photos as well, so we can release some of that information. And then obviously testing's coming up soon too, so stay on board for that, and please keep sharing.
We won't even be able to discuss the first test.
Oh, you
It's
can
all
still
behind
look at
closed doors.
not the timesheets,
They're only going to release the best time of each team.
are they?
That's it.
Is that so? Is that because they're worried that there might be?
No, I don't think it's worried. I think it's probably just to give teams one test day when they're not under any scrutiny, just to do their thing. And then when they come back, we'll have another 2 more. Then they'll be like, all right, now open to the public. You know, you've had your shakedowns, because it's probably going to be their first car shakedowns as well. That's the other thing. So I thought it was interesting, but somewhat understandable. But there won't be much to discuss, that's for sure.
I didn't know about that. That's a problem. But anyway, for everyone, please stay on board. Please keep sharing the word about the podcast. Keep liking and sharing on the socials as well. And hopefully we'll be bringing another podcast to you in the not so distant future. So thanks so much, guys, for jumping on. And I think we'll leave it there. Cheers.
Thanks, mate.
Guys.